would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California. Member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Today is Monday, September 26th, 2016. Another week in the can, so to speak. I hope it was a good week and a great weekend for everyone out there. I suppose this is the point where I should just say all the wonderful things I did relating to real estate over the weekend. No. God, what can I say? I'm human. I'm weak. The new season of Longmire came out on Netflix, so that's kind of what I did. And I feel this obligation to try to be the motivational guy and say, do all your stuff. And then but you know what? Every once in a while you need to have a little candy. And that's what I did. If you'd like to get in contact with me and berate me for spending way too much time watching Longmire over the weekend, head on over to therebelbroker.com. Click on Contact the Rebel Broker. You can send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, questions, or recriminations from there. So feel free. At the top of the page is a big red button. It says, take the survey to support the show. And it'll do exactly what it says it'll do. You'll go to a screen. It'll ask for your name and your email address. You'll click a button that says, take the survey. And two things will happen. Well, almost two things. First thing, you'll go to the actual survey. Well, you'll be asked for your email address again. And as long as your email address in the survey matches the email address you entered at that first screen, you will then be entered into the drawing to win a $50 Amazon gift card. And that drawing is going to be on October 1st, so not that far away right now. Great way for you to not only support the show, but potentially make $50. So there's just no lose for you. And you get entered twice because we're going to draw again on November 1st. And everybody who's in now everybody who's on the list will get included. If you are someone who did take the survey previously and did not enter your email address, unfortunately, to qualify to get the $50 gift card from Amazon, you will have to go through the process again. But this time you'll have to provide an email address because the only way I can get you the gift card is using your email address. So there you go. Anything else sexy? If you'd like to join the insiders, that is the Rebel Insiders. Those are the folks who will get the newsletter on the occasions when it comes out. That'll get content and stuff that I'm planning on creating. Just sort of an inside look into what's coming, and hopefully not just a one-way thing. Hopefully not just me sending you stuff, but hopefully for the group of folks who want to give a little bit more feedback about the show, maybe actually get into some interesting conversations. But it'll also be an opportunity for you to get access to content that's really just not going to be available via the show, because maybe it might be cool forms to use, or forms aren't cool, but cool tools to use to help you move forward with investments of various types, those kinds of things. So do join in there. And the easiest way to do that is to text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. That is, text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222, and then follow the prompts. The prompt will ask you to enter your email address, send it, and you are done. And you are on the insiders list. Finally, I promise to never share your contact information with anyone else, whether you register on my website for the insiders list, whether you register through the text thing that I just discussed, and however I get your contact info. I don't sell it. I don't rent it. I don't give anyone else access to your personal info. And that is my personal promise from me to you. All right. So out there in the wide, wonderful world of folks who chime in on such things, the good folks over at Forbes decided to share 3 tips for finding incredible real estate deals through the multiple listing service. So I thought I'd give them a test drive here. We could review them, maybe even fine tune them a little bit in our analysis. So number one on their list was to be first. That seems like a pretty good suggestion. Quote, "We all know what happens to the bird who hunts for worms early, and the same principle applies to finding deals on the multiple listing service. Although the majority of new listings are likely not going to be worth your time, there are always some agents who list properties far below their actual value. In a competitive real estate market like the one we find ourselves in today, these properties go fast." So let's talk about that a teeny bit, because it's not wrong. But what you will find is there is still a pretty good chunk of buyers out there that are going to wait. You'll see listings come up that'll oftentimes they won't even show up in the MLS yet. Sometimes it'll be one of those deals where they hold them off. But when they do show up in the MLS, there will frequently be notations in there that only the real estate agents can see that say, "Please do not show till after the open house." If you have a property that comes on the market and you seriously think that there's a really good chance this is something your clients are going to dig, or if you as a buyer or an investor think this is awesome and you really want to get involved, I would suggest contacting the listing agent ahead of time or as soon as it comes on the market and asking to preview it. You could say that you just don't have the bandwidth to do it on the open house, or you won't be available to do it on the open house day. But see if you can't convince them to let you go in and take a look at the place early. Simply because right now I actually think this kind of a strategy may actually work better. In a lot of areas, I'm finding that the wait times are longer in terms of how long it's taking homes to close. So it may be that we're heading into a time frame when leveraging off of these kinds of things is actually better than before, just because we've now left the summer season. Another thing about being first is to recognize how you get that data. Now, normally in my system, there's several different ways that folks who have an automated search running can get the information. First are the people who really want their agent to do more of the work for them. And that's called sort of the concierge method, which means the listings I first get the alert, and then I do a quick review of them and only send you the ones that I think fit your needs, or that from my understanding will fit your needs. I do that for some clients. However, you need to really feel like you're on the same page as your agent. If you find that if you find yourself in a position where you're finding tons and tons of properties that meet your needs or that meet your search, and you're having to sort of keep that search less focused because perhaps the things you want most are things that tend to be entered incorrectly into the MLS system, or that don't even have really a category per se. A good example would be, let's say you've got folks who are interested in getting a home with no stairs. Perhaps there is someone in a wheelchair or what. It could be a wide variety of things. Wheelchair access is something that there's no checkbox for. And sometimes that's, even if they do mention wheelchair access, it's not real wheelchair access, as in there are 4 or 5 steps that are required to get to where you need to be to get into the property, those types of things. And so oftentimes those are totally something you can manage. Me as a real estate agent, if I had someone telling me they didn't want to see homes that had 3 or 4 steps, leading up to the house, I'd say, well, you know what? I will connect you with a guy who will tell you how to put a ramp in on the front of the house so we can open up the door to other properties. But that's too specific for this example. I apologize. The point I'm trying to make is that there are many features that really can only be filtered by a human being. So if your agent is in a position to do that for you and you feel comfortable enough with your agent, and you're going to want to feel comfortable with your agent on multiple levels. One, you want to feel comfortable with your agent being someone who absolutely has your best interests at heart, because while I'm not saying this is happening in a widespread world, there is always that possibility that by letting your agent do concierge service for you, they're not going to show you properties that offer lower commissions. Usually the commission for the person who brings the buyer is it's always typically half of what the total commission is. And that can be anything from, I've seen it as low as 1.75% up to 3% on your typical residential home. And if they see a home that'll meet your needs, that'll pay them a 3% commission, and a home of the same price that would also meet your needs at 2.5, well, they may move you more towards that 3% home. So it's going to be up to you. How close do you feel with your agent in terms of really feeling like they're absolutely out there for you? If you're in a very tight market where there's not a lot of listings anyway, less of a problem, simply because they're going to want to show you stuff that's there, because there's not a whole lot to choose from. In marketplaces where there's tons and tons of different properties, and it's a little bit more of a balanced marketplace, this would probably become a slightly bigger issue. But again, it's a situation where you want to make sure you're trusting your agent. Now, if you don't use concierge, in other words, your agent filters them before you ever see them, then you're going to have several choices. One is to get the listing sent to you via, at least in my market. These are options I can give you using my MLS. There's no guarantee that this same standard is available in every MLS across the country. I'm going to guess there's probably a very close set of options that are similar, but for my MLS system right here in Santa Clara County, California, these are the options that I have. I can send you homes that meet your needs the second they come on the marketplace, meaning that the real estate agent has entered into the MLS, they click the submit button, and within 20 to 30 minutes of that, I'm going to get an email, and you'll get an email telling you that that home has been listed. That is the most timely way to go. If you are hot to trot and you have one of those schedules where you can jump on things real fast, then you want to go with that option. Another one is a daily summary, and your agent can send that to you at whatever time of day you select. Again, that's a feature specific to my multiple listing service, so I don't know if it's nationwide, so you'll want to ask. I normally do it at the default, I think, is 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. I actually think in the afternoon is a little bit better, around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, simply because that way you'll also catch any listings that have been entered in the morning. Frequently what will happen, typically you're not going to lose anything if you get that update in the morning. But most folks do their listing presentations later in the day, and then usually they enter them either right away that evening or first thing in the morning. So for those agents who may have not entered it the night they got the listing, who entered it the next morning, that way you're guaranteed of catching those if you feel like time is of the essence. And finally is weekly. And I think I actually have options of doing it weekly, every other week, or even monthly. I don't think I've ever set up someone for monthly. But those are your various options. You need to determine what kind of buyer you are. How aggressively do you want to jump on these? My suggestion is to get it at least daily if you're serious. You're going to want to at least know about these way ahead of time, so that, and then have your realtor explain to you any undisclosed stuff that may have been associated with that listing. If there are private comments that say, "Yeah, we don't want anyone looking at it till such and such a date," there's going to be things in there that are only available to your real estate agent, and they can calibrate you to that. And then find out if you can get in there and see it as soon as possible. If you can get in there and see it the same day that it was listed, decide that it's something that you want, and even if it says no offers until, you need to weigh whether or not you want to wait. If it's a super competitive marketplace, you may want to go ahead and jump in and do that. If it's not that competitive, there may not even be limits on when you can submit the offer. But you absolutely want to make sure that you're in there, that you're someone who's going to be able to make an offer as quickly as possible. What's my take on it in terms of what I've seen relating to scenarios either where I've been the listing agent and folks who have approached me, or as a buyer? If you do everything right, if you do everything the way I've described it in terms of how you're dealing with the listings as they appear, being very aggressive in hitting them up the day of, you're gonna find yourself in the top 10 to 5% of buyers if you're represented by a good agent, or even if they're not a good agent, if because you have this information now, you're pushing your agent to do these things. On the listing side, what I have seen is, even though I'll get calls from buyers and I'll get tons of contacts from folks who come and look at the place, and I'll receive offers, I find that a lot of agents just aren't aggressively doing the kind of job that you would want them to do for their buyers. And I think that, and as much as I'd love to say it's how I craft an offer, I often think that one of the main reasons why I have such a good rate of acceptance in terms of the offers that I submit on behalf of my buyers is simply because I've done all the things that needed to be done. A really good example is offers that are submitted without all the stuff. You typically, when you've got someone who's listing who knows what they're doing, they're going to say, hey, here's all the documents relating to this, all the disclosures, we've already done everything, and here it is. Here's a link to where you can download all this stuff. Any offers should be submitted with all of these things already signed. And then they'll have a whole packet of documents that they want you to sign. I mean, that typically, I like that when I'm seeing that from a listing agent because that communicates to me that those folks are a little bit more on the ball. And it depends on circumstances. There's certain circumstances where the sellers may not provide some different types of reports, and we'll expect the buyers to be responsible for those. But typically, if I see all those disclosures right there and a request for them to be included, I want to make sure and do that. And as an agent who has done that in the past, had packets of stuff that I wanted signed, submitted with the offer, you'd be amazed how many agents apparently did not follow those directions and didn't provide them. I can remember an offer, a multiple offer situation where I got 5 offers and only 2 of them submitted all the documents that were originally asked for. So there you go. You need to make sure that you're also perhaps being a backstop for your agent if you're concerned that they're not in getting all those details taken care of. Make sure that they are. All right, so we've managed to get through number 1 on our list. We're going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, we'll talk about number 2, so don't go away. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everybody. We're going through the Forbes tips for finding incredible real estate deals through the multiple listing service. A couple of more things, though, to hit before we move on to item number 2 on their list is the things that should always be in place, or things you should always have in mind before you're even really beginning that search. Number 1, get pre-qualified. You should have already talked to your lender. You should already be all pre-qualified for homes within the range that you've been pre-qualified for, and you should have an ability to easily obtain a pre-qualification letter. Typically today, what you're going to get is a link from your lender that will let you go to a website, enter in the address of the property you're going to make an offer on, the amount of money you're going to offer, and then print out something that is customized specifically for that property. That's the way you do it. Next on their list, these are things they're adding, set your criteria, understand what exactly you want to buy and how much you're willing to pay. This will help you sort through all the various things and let you eliminate properties that just aren't within your range. Create automatic alerts, which we already covered. And here's one that is interesting, and it's a way to handle a very impacted marketplace. If you are in a situation where, for whatever reason, you cannot get into that property before an open house or whatever else, you can make an offer without physically looking at the property. And this may scare the bejesus out of you, but this is a tip that might be more, according to Forbes, geared towards the advanced buyer. According to the guy who's writing this article, he rarely looks at a property first before making an offer. So why would you want to be willing to do that? Well, because first of all, for someone in the typical frame of things, you're going to have a 2-week period of time to do any investigations that you want before you decide to purchase the property, and gives you an opportunity to exit the contract without any loss to you. So if you do that earnest money deposit, and you go and you do it without it, having seen the property, you can do a physical inspection once they've accepted the offer, and then everything's fine. Now, this is something else that almost deserves its own show in terms of folks who do make offers on properties before they ever go inside of it. I have done this a few times, unfortunately, and then unfortunately I was doing it during a time when everything was so impacted. There were so many different buyers that they'd always, they'd end up having another offer. However, but if you can get in there hours and sometimes days ahead of other folks, and they get your offer and it's in their hands and nobody else comes to them with an offer. Because remember, we're dealing with folks' temperaments in a lot of cases, even in markets where it may be a little bit tighter. If they've put it up on the MLS and everyone has just said, yeah, okay, well, we're going to follow the rules and we're not going to look at the house till the weekend or after the first open house, and we're not going to make offers till after that. Well, okay, then they're not going to communicate with the listing agent and the sellers. But when you submit that offer, that shows you're ready to go. That shows things are ready to happen. And if they don't get that same kind of response from anybody else, they may actually think, well, gosh, maybe we should just do this now. Maybe we could just put this to bed right now, and we actually can get into contract without having to worry about going through all this open house stuff and all these other inconveniences. And it costs you nothing to do these kinds of offers. Now, how many times have I done this? Just over the last year, I've done at least 6. And these were ones where it met the sniff test just from reviewing the data online. I liked where it was. I liked what it had. The square footage was right. Assuming the place wasn't about to get sucked into a hellmouth, it was going to make a good property for me. Did I offer full asking price? No, I did not. One of the benefits of this is by going aggressive like this, what you're hoping for is that one person out of however many that may just say, well, it's not what I'm asking for, but it's within my comfort range. And again, it's all going to depend on calibrating yourself to the marketplace as to whether or not you're offering full price, below asking price, or maybe under some crazy circumstances over asking price. But I'm tending to go a little bit more aggressive. I've got time. There's no fire burning under me for me to jump out of the property I'm in and move into another one. So for me, it's really about finding a good deal and being willing to wait for it. But again, markets are fickle things, and by waiting, I may actually be costing myself money. But I am kind of in that mode where I've convinced myself that I think we're heading into a slower time of the year, so this strategy might just work out for me. All right, next, number 2, be the last. According to this, and this is a quote, have you ever tried to sell a home and not been able to? For those unfamiliar with the scenario, let me just tell you plainly, it sucks. Sellers who struggle to sell a property are often paying 2 house payments at once or are being held back from moving into a new phase of their life by the anchor of that unsold property. For this reason, a seller who has had their property sitting on the market for 6 months is likely much more inclined to accept a low offer than the owners of newer properties. This is a great tactic, and it is also why I subscribe to a list on my MLS that tells me whenever a property comes back onto the market. Because there's a lesson that has been learned by the folks who list, go into escrow, and fall out of escrow. And I don't even think we've ever discussed this particular topic before on the show in all the time I've been doing it. But if you can focus in on those moments when sellers have had their confidence shaken by the market, odds are that person who falls back on the marketplace, it either happened because there was a problem with the house or a problem with the financing. But odds are it was the financing or the buyer got cold feet or something along those lines. And I would treat these as you treated the others, where be willing to go ahead and make that sight unseen offer. But my feeling would also be willing to be aggressive on that price, simply because after going through this, if you can present them with an offer that absolutely has that feel of being ironclad, it's going to go through, you're going to find yourself in a better position, because the odds are they're going to be willing to pay a little bit money for the comfort of knowing they have a solid deal in front of them and that this thing's going to close. Particularly if you have folks who are paying bills for the property they're trying to sell and for a home that they currently live in. As an example, the home I just helped some folks buy were owned by folks who were paying a mortgage in the home they lived in and were also paying for the holding costs of this particular property that we were trying to buy. So that allowed me to be a little bit more aggressive in my approach to how we were going to form our offer. Now, there was a lot of pressure to make an offer that was much higher than what we ended up making our offer at. And I think in this case, it was also being able to sniff out what I think was not correct data. So I was given the impression at the time that there were multiple offers, that the price would go above an X amount of money. And there was something about the scenario that didn't feel right, simply because there was way too much willingness to. There was way too the different kinds of conversations I normally have with a multiple offer situation just weren't happening. There was no, we need it by this time. There weren't a lot of these things where if you've actually got multiple offers in your hands that you really say to people who want to submit an offer. Because if you don't, there's no certainty in what's going on. And for me, there was just too much uncertainty. They seemed A-okay with us sort of putting an offer together whenever we felt like it versus giving us any solid stuff. And there were other things, but it was a situation where my instincts, I think, took over a little bit. So we ended up offering quite a bit below what we were being led to believe was the price at which the home would absolutely sell. So we came in probably, I think, between 15 and 18,000 below what that number was. And sure enough, our offer was accepted. So it's also one of those situations where, and this was one of those where this property had been on the market for quite a while. These folks had been paying the holding cost for, I think, 4 months. And it had gone on and off the market. So it ended up working out really well for my folks. And it's absolutely a technique that I think is fantastic for folks who are in the position of wanting to get a property and trying to put themselves as much as possible into a position, even in a very seller-centric market, where you might be able to get yourself a better deal. And also keep in mind, there's a lot of weird things that go into people's heads. And if you don't have your realtor informing you and giving you the inside scoop on these things, and you know what else is nuts? A lot of agents perpetuate this. So, and of course, in my marketplace, it's real hard to put a stigma on properties simply because there's so few of them. So there's a lot of folks out there buying, not a lot of folks out there selling. But if you find a property that comes back onto the market, I've had clients in the past who said, well, we don't want to mess with that because who knows what was wrong with that house for it to go back on the market. Well, no. That's totally not the attitude you should have, because the bottom line is anything that was revealed to be wrong with that property is now stuff that the seller is legally required to disclose to you, at least in the state of California. And plus, you're going to be going through the normal inspection process. You get to decide whether or not you accept the previous property inspections or whatever might exist. So it's not costing you anything it's potentially costing you a ton to not look at these properties, but not costing you a thing to look at them. So I don't think rejecting it because it fell out of contract for some reason that we don't know, rejecting it on that basis is shooting yourself in the foot. I don't think you should be doing that. You might want to find out what happened with the transaction, but there's absolutely no reason. In fact, those should be targets. Though you should consider those prime targets, because remember one thing we have talked about before as it relates to sellers. We've talked about sellers learning the market, and we've talked about sellers getting themselves into a mindset of being willing to potentially take less than their asking price. And what have we talked about? Typically, it's time. If you get a property that's been on the market for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, with each passing week, they're starting to get a little bit panicky. They're starting to wonder why. I've had clients within the last year who absolutely fell into that mindset, even though they might have been calibrated to the idea that homes of their type in that market were tending to go into contract after 36 days on average. Once we hit 25 days, they were freaking out, and they were wondering if they were overpriced, and they were starting to question themselves. Ended up going off the market in 32 days for way more than they could have imagined. So it really depends on the mindset of the seller. Time is one thing that'll absolutely do it for you, but I think a huge one is going back on the market after having failed. So look for those transactions. Make them your focus. Get a separate list just of properties that have gone back on the market. And let me suggest also that because I do this, when you do that, raise the price that you're searching for on those properties that have fallen back onto the market, that have returned to the market. Add, say, $20,000 to your max price. Why? Because what you're going to do is you're going to offer just at or below your max price and just not be willing to go above that, and see if you can't get yourself a home that's in a higher price point because of the concerns of the seller. They've been through a bad experience. They have a bad taste in their mouth. So now they want to sell. Take advantage of that. Okay. Number 3, play the odds. Quote, finally, the third tip in finding incredible deals on the MLS, play the odds. Now, this tip is more of a mindset shift than an actual tip, but it's so powerful that it could transform your entire business overnight. Playing the odds means understanding how the real estate funnel works and playing it correctly. The real estate funnel is simple, according to this author. 1, leads come in the top of the funnel. Of those leads, you'll analyze some of them. Of those analyzed leads, you'll offer on some. Of those offers, some will get accepted. In other words, if you want to buy more property, you need to make more offers. If you want to make more offers, you need to analyze more leads. And if you want to analyze more leads, you need to get more leads into your funnel. So this is an interesting one because it's also part of the little speech that I give to buyers, particularly in a market like this. When you're setting your criteria on what properties that you want to search for, my feeling is to go as broad as possible. Of course, the primary limitation is price. I have even had clients who were approved for, say, X amount of dollars, and that's all we put in terms of the search. Why? Well, they also happen to be listeners to the show, and they remembered a past show where I talked about just find a property, and if it has enough going for it that you could potentially make changes to it to make it the property you want, then do that. If no one's buying it because it's a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom or whatever, if it happens to be a 1-bedroom with 2 baths, well, that's great. You can then add bedrooms to that as long as it has enough lot size to accommodate it and it falls within the setbacks of the county or city that you're in. And that's a particularly keen way to go if you're someone who's willing to take on those sort of challenges. Now, you've got to have the mindset. I realize most buyers out there want move-in ready homes. But if you can embrace this idea of taking on something challenging, because here's a really good example. In my particular area, there are some older homes that are all one bedroom. There's some that are 1 bedroom and 1.5 baths. Those are A-okay. They tend to be older, but they also tend to be on larger lots. In fact, they tend to be on lots that are larger than most of your 3 and 4 bedroom homes. Why? This is a kind of an interesting community where you'll find corners where some of these homes were down here for a super long time. San Martin is a good example. Parts of Morgan Hill at the edges of town are a good example. The north edge of Morgan Hill, the kind of a western edge of Morgan Hill, parts of northern Gilroy. These are areas where you've got older homes, but you can acquire these properties in some cases for what would be considered an excellent price when you realize how big the lots are. In fact, interesting point, I came across a property that was just land. I then on the same set of searches, I review my searches every day, saw a funky little 1-bedroom home that you could purchase for the same price that had the same amount of acreage, but it was actually in a better location. So what you'll find sometimes is that you can actually get into a place that's already got a house on it. There's such a disconnect, I think, on the part of a lot of folks when they're searching for a home in terms of the things that they put in the search criteria that they're putting in, that they end up getting totally disconnected from properties that could represent a ridiculous return if they're willing to take on that mantle of being the renovation person, the person who comes in and decides, yeah, I'm going to be adding 1,000 square feet to this house. It's definitely a challenge. It's not something you want to jump into lightly. You want to figure out whether or not that's for you. But it's amazing how you can frequently find these scenarios that would surprise you in a lot of different marketplaces. And I got to believe this is also true in a lot of other different areas. So that kind of covers what we got from Forbes on this. I would actually offer up a fourth. Be persistent and patient. Whether you're looking for your first investment or whether you're looking for a home that you want to live in, this idea of treating it like a funnel of properties that come through, make it through several filters, and then as soon as it reaches one where it's met your criteria, just write an offer on it. Jump in and do it. There's no downside. It costs you absolutely nothing to submit an offer. You're going to have to generate a pre-approval list. You may have to sign a few documents, but in this wonderful digital age, that basically means clicking a bunch of boxes on your browser if you've got an agent who has sort of jumped in with the digital signature technology. And you can even do it from your phone. I literally made an offer on a house from my iPhone in about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when I got an alert for a home that met my needs. So I went ahead and submitted an offer on it. In fact, what's great about that is that your confidence and comfort with doing that will grow. And at no time are you committed until you've actually inspected the property. You're going to still get that 2 weeks to do the physical inspection, to walk through the property, to get your inspections done. And if you go and you look at it during that first 2 weeks and you just don't like the place, the pictures weren't telling the story, you're covered. You're not going to lose any money, and all you've lost is a relatively short period of time. In fact, if you go out and check out that property immediately after getting an accepted offer, you'll never even have to write a check. Typically what I do is I will indicate on the offer that my client will wire transfer the funds to escrow within 3 days. Well, if 3 days of the offer being accepted. So on the day of the acceptance or the day after the acceptance, you go and inspect that property. It's not what you want. You're done. You back out and you move on to the next property. So I hope that's helpful. I think that in a lot of marketplaces, this is a great way to go. It depends on what your situation is. But in general, I think that this actually applies to anybody who's out there looking to buy real estate. So I hope this has been useful. I do appreciate you spending your valuable time with me Monday through Friday. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.